Welcome to Latest TV News, and today we're at Driftwood, an amazing garden by the sea, managed by Jeff Stonebanks, who has created an oasis. I've been here just 10 minutes and I must have said wow about 100 times. And we're all in luck because this garden is open to the public every June and July, and this year, due to popularity, is being extended. Jeff, what an amazing garden you have here.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say you've said wow a few times, because that's the one thing that I enjoy seeing people say, because what's the point in having a nice garden and people don't appreciate it? So thank you very much indeed, yeah.
And the wow is not just for the colour, the beauty of the plants, the layout of all the garden rooms, but also the amazing statistics involved in this garden.
Well, there are a few good statistics that go with it, yeah. I mean, I always talk to visitors when they come along, get a chance to either come straight in for one price or pay a different price, and I tell them the story of the garden. Most opt for the story of the garden, and I always tell the same thing. But the facts that really get people interested are we've raised over £170,000 for charity, 115 of that for Macmillan Cancer Support, and it's all gone to the Horizon Centre in Brighton.
That's amazing.
30 odd for the National Garden Scheme, and the rest for smaller charities like the R&L up the road, St Wilfrid's Hospice and others. Yeah, and the other bit that people sort of go agog at is that I bake all my own cakes. And over the course of the time we've been opening the garden, I've baked in excess of 10,500 portions of cake, which is a lot of cake, as Scylla would say. And yeah, so we've raised that. Sorry?
23,000 visitors.
23,000 visitors, yeah, £170,000 and 10,500 cakes.
And this is just a normal garden, isn't it?
It is. It's not. I mean, I really like the fact that people park their car outside the house and look up and think, oh yeah, right, what? It's a very ordinary, boring house. And the front garden sits above the pavement, so you've actually got to get into the front garden to understand what we're about. And then people walk up the side of the house and into the back garden, and as you say, it's jaw-dropping. When I first put it forward to open for the first time for the public, it was Seaford in Bloom back in 2009, and a couple of elderly ladies ran Seaford in Bloom, and I phoned them up to say I'd like to participate, and they said, oh, we've never had a garden in Bishopston before. I said, well, come and have a look. And they parked their car at the bottom of the drive. There was still a lawn at the front of the house, it was just the back. And they struggled to get up the drive, to be honest, and they came in and they came through that side gate, and one looked at the other, their jaws visibly dropped, and one said to the other, oh, it's like stepping into Alice in Wonderland. We were in.
I mean, there's so much to see here, and there's a lot of art as well. So.
There's a lot of art that we own, but when we open the garden, I think it's a perfect venue to display art as well. So, having done Artway for 10 years, up till 2019, I continue to call upon local artists that we'd used before to see if they wanted to display. OK, the footfall's not as great when you don't have public days, but we had 500 people pre-booked last year, and at the moment, as of today, 478 people have pre-booked to see it, have already been or have still to come before the 5th of August. So the artists are willing to deposit their stuff here. All they've got to do is deliver it, lay it round the garden, and yeah, we've sold quite a bit of art. So it's a great venue for displaying art, but it all has to be outdoor art.
OK, tell us a bit about how this evolved then, because up until the fact that you've been named a coronation champion as well.
Right. I mean, the whole thing started purely by chance, and I suppose I got the bug, because what's the point in having a nice garden and not opening it to the public and letting other people see it? And then the add-on to that was that all these people want to see it, it gets a reputation, and then they start giving you money. So it was decided that we would raise money for charity, and it was about 2012 when I decided to focus on Macmillan and the National Garden Scheme. And really, that's what drives me now. I mean, I used to organise a garden trail for Macmillan, did that for 10 years from Brighton to Seaford, and that could raise, if the weather was good and playing in our ball, then we could raise in excess of sort of £10,000 for Macmillan in one weekend. But it's amazing how many people are prepared to come to a small garden as well. I mean, this garden is part of the Gardeners World 2-for-1 booklet. So if people have a Gardeners World 2-for-1 card, yes, get yourself in and get 2 in for 1. And it's all the money that we can raise now that really drives me forward. I'm getting old, it gets harder every year, but I like the fact that we can raise that much money for charity.
Okay, and you've met royalty several times, haven't you, because of the work you've
Yeah,
done?
I have. I've been very, very lucky. I mean, Charles, both as King Charles and Prince of Wales, is patron of Macmillan Cancer Support. And back in 2018, Macmillan were able to hold a reception at Buckingham Palace, and they were able to invite about 150 or 60 of their 5,500 volunteers. I was extremely lucky to be one of them, and went to the palace and met Charles. Later that same year, for the work I'd done in Seaford with the garden trail I'd organised here, I got an invitation to a royal garden party, and the only sad thing for me was it wasn't the Queen, it was Charles and Camilla. But hey, it was an amazing day, and I took my mum, who was in her 90s and in a wheelchair, and somebody said to me on the day, you ought to really wear a buttonhole of flowers from your garden. I thought, you're right, the garden's got me there. So I made this buttonhole up. Mum had bought a lovely new outfit and she'd hired quite a large hat. So we're there on the day. Because Mum was in a wheelchair, we could get to the front of the barrier. Charles is talking to the people that he has been told to speak to, and he sees my buttonhole. Breaks ranks, comes over, shakes my hand, shakes my mother's hand and chats to us. We spin round and go to the queue where Camilla is. Camilla sees my mum's hat, comes over, shakes my mum's hand and says, oh, where have you come from? I said, oh, we've come from Seaford. Oh, I know Seaford really well. I used to bathe on the beach as a child because our family comes from Plumpton. So, yeah, been incredibly lucky.
And you must have talked about gardens as well.
I did. Well, when I met the King at the Palace, or the Prince of Wales at the Palace as was, yeah, I'd been to Highgrove not long before, and I was telling him a story about how the urns at the back of his house and seeing his gardeners lift the innards out and drop new innards in to brighten the area up had really been what inspired me to use as many containers as I do in my own garden.
Because what struck me is you've described yourself in the past as not being a gardener, but you must be, a garden Picasso, a garden artist to create
Well, I
all
like the
this.
garden artist, but yeah, I always say to people that I never feel as I'm gardening, I always feel as I'm dressing a film set, because I get this idea in my head, as you see behind, of how I want something to look, and I try and recreate that. But yeah, I don't consider myself an expert in any way, because everything I know I've learned hands-on, doing it practically, making mistakes, etc. People always say to me, oh, your garden's amazing, how about coming and giving me some tips? I always say no, because if you're engaged into something where money's involved, you've really got to know what you're talking about, and I would never place myself in that position.
It is so beautiful to look at and peaceful here as well. So many water features. And
Yeah.
tell us a bit about what's in each of the rooms.
Well, the room we're in now is conceived, as I say, primarily to use the sleepers behind on end and then use it as a theatre to display. I've got a huge collection of succulents. So that was the idea behind this particular room. And also now we've put some French windows in the downstairs room here, so that the idea is the older we get, if we can't get up the garden, at least my partner and I can appreciate this area direct from the house. On the other side of the garden, there's an area where I used to have a sunken pond. Again, got difficult to maintain as I got older. So I decided to fill the pond in, and again created an idea on paper of using corten steel for a wall and a feature, and got a landscaper in to reinterpret my drawing into reality. Further up the garden, behind the sleepers here, there's a huge bed full of flowers, and you can see the hydrangea behind us popping over the top. Another seating area. I suppose part of the idea behind the rooms is when you're open to the public, you want to be able to inspire people to sit down and enjoy your tea and cakes, but also be able to look at different elements. And I think if you look at the comments people have made about the garden over time on TripAdvisor and other places, it's the fact that they're inspired. It's an inspirational garden, and that I like that, because they're my ideas. I may have pinched them from somebody young subconsciously when I visited other gardens, but yeah, I'm really happy to think that people come here and get inspired. For me, visiting a garden, a smaller garden that's on a scale you can recognise, like this one, is much better, because the chances are you'll see something you can reproduce. If you go and visit a large garden, the chances are you might like it, but there's not a lot you can do to pinch the ideas from it.
No, it's very, very inspirational. And so you've planted everything here over the last 20 or so
Yeah,
years.
we moved here in September 2004, and I started the garden out of boredom after having done the house in 2007. So yeah, 17 years. Everything's gone in. There are only 3 things in the back garden: a tall tree at the top, an apple tree and a pear tree. Everything else I've planted over the last 17 years.
Another thing I spotted on TripAdvisor was well, first of all the positive comments about the beautiful garden, but also the beautiful cakes.
Ooh, yeah, I mean, I am. People always ask about that, but I mean, in another life, when I went to college, I trained as a caterer. My first job was as a caterer, working for Trust House Forties, as was out on motorway service areas, and the BBC at Broadcasting House. And then I moved into the post office, who had an in-house caterer, and then over time, I transferred from the in-house caterer over to working in Royal Mail proper. So my career my 30-year career with Royal Mail spanned catering, managing number crunchers and personnel managers. So it's quite a varied career.
Okay, well, we'll enjoy the cakes in a moment, but
Okay.
let's take a look at some of the rooms. And we'll be back shortly after the break. So we're going to take a look at some of the plants at this amazing garden, Driftwood.
This fuchsia here is really special to me because my dad bought this for my mum as a ruby wedding present many years ago, and my dad's no longer with us, but my mum's 97, so ruby wedding anniversary is a pretty long time ago. I'm 71, do your maths. And it used to be in my dad's garden, and I've got it here now. Right next to it is a more delicate fuchsia. This is a fuchsia genii, and my aunt, who had a really beautiful garden, initially in Leon-Solent and then later in Hertfordshire, when she died 20 years ago, I took this from her garden. So this one's Auntie Margaret and this one's Dad. They're great features for me because for me, a garden's are much about the personal items in it. It is about the general whole of the aspect of the garden. And I've got lots of plants that have special memories.
And what's the hydrangea called?
Well, the hydrangea to me is called Edna. I can't remember its proper name, but last year my mum, who'd had a childhood friend since she was 5, sadly Edna passed away, and Mum decided she wanted a plant in the garden in memory of Edna. So this hydrangea to me is Edna.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. People, when they visit my garden, always say, how on earth do you manage to keep your hostas looking good? Okay, there are a few little holes on there, but for me, the trick is each of the pots have got a saucer on the ground with an inverted saucer and a little moat round them, and it really works well. Because for me, hostas are a real perfect plant to go in a shade, and as you see, these are in the shade now, and what's more, they're about to start producing some beautiful flowers as well.
Lovely.
When people visit the garden, they're always inspired and say, you've got such an interesting mix of plants in the garden. For me, I no longer buy plants that I think should work. I buy plants that I like. And in my world, plants have got two choices, they sink or swim. So I buy plants I like, and very often they're plants that pop up on my Facebook feed or somewhere, and I thought, I'm going to have that. This was one of those about 3 years ago, and it's an Escallonia Pink L. And so many people in the last couple of years have visited the garden and asked what it is. And I've even had people on their phones ordering them before they've even left the garden. Really pretty plant.
Lovely.
I made a conscious decision a couple of years ago when I changed the look of the garden to stop using annuals, because whilst annuals look amazing, they don't like wet weather, and obviously they need a lot of watering. So from the last 2 years, I've opted to use geraniums and osteospermums, both of which are pretty drought-tolerant plants and are equally as attractive. Another great one of my favourites, the one in the middle there, is got lots of names. Its common name is Mexican fleabane, Dartmouth daisy, or its proper name is Erigionon Kovinskianus. But it's stunning because all the different colours are in the same plant, and it will grow anywhere in nooks and crannies, and it's a great plant for ground cover. This area was created as a result of doing the sleepered area down there, because the sleepers are behind here, and I just jam-pack plants in. I love hydrangeas, and this one here is a Panacolata Limelight, and as time goes on it starts sort of limey green, then it becomes white and darker coloured as the time goes on. The one below it, another pretty one, pretty much like that one we looked at down there, but this one's actually called Red Baron. And then the one behind me here, it's been damaged a bit, unfortunately, because we've had so much wind, but this one is Annabelle, and it produces these real sort of balloon-like blooms, which are really amazing. So lots of pretty. One of my favourite plants in the garden, only a small amount here, Alstroemeria. This is Alstroemeria Indian Summer, and it's got these beautiful flowers that are just repeat and repeat all the time. The thing that people need to know is that when the stem has finished flowering, don't just cut the top off, you have to just yank the whole stem out of the ground, and then it will encourage the plant to develop even more.
I love all the insects everywhere.
Well, there are lots of insects. I mean, some of them are probably not doing any good to the plants, but particularly the beetles. The beetles are really pretty.
So, I mean, garden rooms are a novel idea to me.
Well, the thing is, this garden was on a slope. It's north facing, on a slope, so not the easiest of plots to maintain. And because it was on a slope, there were no level spaces. Not that I ever sit in the garden, I always sit and see something that wants doing. So the concept originally was to try and create spaces that were level to be able to put seats on. And by doing that, by virtue of doing that, and by virtue of trying to create cosseted, safe areas for plants that would not normally grow by the sea, creating a garden room is a perfect foil. I mean, this hedge here behind us is a Grisellina littoralis, which is a really good seaside hedge, and it's perfect for creating a windbreak to grow things behind it which are a bit less able to cope with the weather conditions. This one here, gorgeous this time of the year, is a Calla lily, a black Calla lily, and I'm amazed this year how many blooms it's got on it. It looks amazing.
I like the teacup motif as well.
Yeah, well, about 10 years ago, I bought hundreds of those, made them myself, and one year I sold probably about 300 of those in the garden as by the bird feeders or something you could put a nightlight in. Very beachside garden, lots of gravel there, lots of succulents, palms and succulent there. And on this side, again, a very gravel type garden with the main palms in it. The huge palm in the centre is a jelly palm, a Butia capita, and you probably can't see, but it's got this enormous flower head that's about to come out. And once it's grown, it will come out and stick out to about here and have all these beautiful yellow flowers on it. This one here, you can just see a remaining flower. It's finished flowering, but it's an aloe striatula, and it produces those amazing yellow flowers there that look like mini bananas. Really hardy aloe. It's a very Mediterranean plant, and it'll go down to -20 without any protection in the winter. So it's a really fab plant. And just beneath it there, a really good seaside plant. It's a sea lavender. Dies back to nothing. The leaves come up, and then these beautiful heads, a bit like gyp, but you can dry it or use it as a cut flower in the house. Looks stunning colour.
Yeah, a bit like gypsophila.
Yes.
I've never seen so many butterflies.
This is another room, the area beside the summer house. This was the first area that I created because I needed this flat area to try and get rid of the slope. Now I'm using it as an area. These are a new type of plant called a mangave, and they're succulents that are supposed to be a bit less tender than conventional succulents, but they're not cheap, so I do tend to put mine away. But these are all a combination of a mix between an agave and a manfreda, and there, as I say, they're called mangaves, but quite interesting leaf formations, as you see. This area here is something that lots of people comment on, and really, to me, it doesn't matter whether you've got a huge garden or a small garden. This is an idea anybody could put on their balcony. Yeah, you'll need a bit of sun. It's in the shade now, but all afternoon this will be in piping hot sun, and these succulents just love the sunshine. This is one of my favourites down here. You can see the leaf edges are tinged with red, and it's an Echeveria Red Sea Monster. And these flower stems will start to come up, and a couple of years ago I had a flower stem over a metre tall from it.
They're frilly leaves.
Yes, really frilly leaves. The only thing about succulents, as I'm sure people will say, is you can't leave them out all summer. They have to go away for the winter. So that's the only hard job left in the garden now, putting them away either in the greenhouse, front or back porches of the house to make sure they're protected for the winter. Down here to my right, we have a lovely little pet called Hector. Hector's over 100 years old, and he belonged to my aunt. So when she died, we inherited Hector, the tortoise. So in this area here is relatively new. This is where there was a sunken pond until a couple of years ago, and some trickle ponds down. And I opted to replace it with this corten steel wall, having sketched it all out for a builder to replicate my ideas. But some of the planting here that's quite unusual is, over there you've got a gunnera, which is the sort of plant that you'd find at Sheffield Park, and you'd walk underneath it because they grow so big. But a few years ago, I was at Hampton Court and I wanted to buy one, and the guy said, if you put it in a pot, it will grow small and contain itself. So that's actually in a huge pot that's buried in the ground. And the one behind me here is in a large pot that's sitting on top of the ground. And they grow much, much better. And it's about as big as it will get. But they're really an impressive architectural plant. And then weaving their way through it, there are 3 buddleias, which are Buddleia Buzz, Magenta, White and Lilac, which are real butterfly magnets. So perfect plants to have in the garden if you want to attract butterflies.
So what a lovely news day. Sunshine, cup of tea, cake, beautiful gardens. Thank you very much,
You are
Jeff.
more than welcome.